How can we make the world better? By making ourselves better. The Dr. Joe Show explores how you can make positive personal change by using his groundbreaking and highly effective I Am approach to understand who we are and why we do what we do. Your small changes can have big effects.
Join us now for the Dr. Joe Show with Mark Stiles of Stiles Law and your host, Dr. Joe Schrand.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Dr. Joe Show.
There's something about applause that is just overwhelmingly marvelous. My oxytocin immediately.
I was just going to say, I believe that would be referred to as oxytocin.
Oxytocin. Not OxyContin, folks. Oxytocin, the neurohormone of trust. That amazing feeling you get when somebody says, "You're amazing." And you get that amazing feeling. Am I repeating myself?
It's amazing.
It is, really. Tom, you coming in to hang out with us after we get the cameras all set up?
Absolutely.
Tom's here. So, what's going on? We've got a great guest coming in tonight. We've got Ed Perry of WATD, the creator and founder of arguably one of the greatest radio stations in the South Shore of Massachusetts. But he's doing all sorts of things, so I cannot wait to have him on.
He was a great guest last time. I'm looking forward to catching up with him again. That last time we sat with him was fascinating.
It was. It really was. And the stories that he brings and the history that he has. And
I can't wait to talk about what he's doing. He's just keep on going.
I know.
Keep on trucking, Eddie.
That's right. So, we're sort of on a resolution theme for 2020 now. So I can't wait to hear what his resolutions are to things that he is creating. Continues to be creative. What is that? What is creative process? How do we do that as human beings? What do you think, Tom?
That's a good one. I would say, off the top of my head, I mean, we're faced with dangers in our caveman days, and it was necessary because we weren't the biggest, we weren't the fastest, we weren't the strongest, and maybe even at the time we weren't even the smartest, but we had to be more creative. We had to, that's why we had the opposable that's why we evolved the opposable thumbs, and we're more helpless as infants,
Yeah. It's
Try arm wrestling of 2-year-olds. They usually lose.
Tom, you sometimes can let them win, and then they boost their self-confidence until they go after somebody that's like 3 years old, and then everything comes crashing down.
From what I understand, correct me if I misunderstand, but we're born more helpless so that we have greater capacity to learn.
I think that's certainly a big part of it. We're also born with an ability to get other people to care for us, and we bond and eye contact, and the first time that a child recognizes who you are and their eyes get big, and and there's another thing called stranger anxiety. Have you guys heard about stranger anxiety? So this is a really interesting developmental thing that happens around 8 months of age or so, where a baby suddenly, well, maybe not suddenly, but realizes that there's an unfamiliar face. Before that, they haven't compared data, so they have, all faces are familiar. So they'll smile at anyone. Anyone can, get a baby to smile. But then they realize that there's a stranger. And intuitively, instinctively, they create stranger anxiety because that stranger may be from another tribe, from another clan, from another family, could be dangerous. Could be dangerous. And very often, stranger anxiety will sometimes occur when babies become more mobile. And they're sort of being able to move away a little bit further from the protective mother or father or whoever's part of their tribe. And so they alert and they yell, basically, "There's a stranger, come and protect me just in case." It can be very uncomfortable, though, for relatives, like grandparents, who go to hug their grandchild, and their grandchild just activates stranger anxiety.
Right.
Thinking, oh, no, there's another predator. So, is that creative?
I was going on a tangent about, how humans have had their disadvantages growing in their growing pains. But for creativity, I mean, what was the invention of a spear?
Right.
And a lot of entrepreneurship, mustn't that stem from that same kind of drive to create, to provide?
Yeah, to create, and I think to create so that you have an advantage over someone who is not a creator. An advantage that is either better resource, residence, relationships, so you are somehow creating something that another person doesn't have. So maybe it's a way like a spear, good way to get food that another person couldn't get, because you can throw a spear further and you can get an animal, get prey, as opposed to having to run after it. So it is sort of interesting. And you know, the listening audience, think about it. Every day you have the opportunity to be creative. Every single day. And that's also an I am, right? That's part of who we are, is to be able to think and be able to create things and wonder about things.
And for those that don't understand what the I am is, can you explain that?
I would be delighted to. So here's the idea. I think no one's broken. I think we're all doing the best we can at every moment in time. This is who I am. I matter. This is my current maximum potential. I am doing the best I can. And we are influenced by 4 domains. No one's going to argue your home has had an influence on who you are. Just think about that. Even as an adult, you know that you're influenced by things that might have happened in your childhood. So your home domain. Your social domain, which is everything other than the home. It's us being here at ATD, it's being at work, it's walking down the street, it's being at school, everything other than home. Home is given a special place. Then, the internal domains. So home and social are outside, and the 2 inside domains are your biological domain of your brain and body. Are you hungry, tired, digesting lunch? Maybe you're on medicine, maybe you have diabetes, maybe you're just getting over a cold. And then the I see domain. How do I see myself? How do I think other people see me? And the reason that's so important is because right now, my I am is being influenced by my co-host, Mark, who's just sort of giggling about something that he's seen, I think, somewhere. So what's going on there?
It's the Facebook comments.
Yeah.
Monica,
yes,
our number 1 fan.
Our number 1 fan, Monica.
Just commented that my hair is very shiny today. So I couldn't help and let that chuckle go out.
That's great. And so what's happened there? That's one of the rules of the I am, right? One of the rules is because everyone has an I am and we respond to everyone, you control no one, you influence everyone. Think about that. You control no one, you influence everyone. When Monica sent that silly little Facebook message, it influenced Mark's biological domain. He started smiling, but I'm trying to go on and on about the I am. That influences my I see domain, thinking, why is Mark smiling?
Right. That's right.
What's happening? So the other rule of the I am, small changes can have big effects. These small changes that we make in our lives, folks, you don't need to change everything. If you think you're going to change everything, you're going to get overwhelmed. You don't need to change everything. A small change can have a big effect. And the I am is the roadmap to that. It's the roadmap because there are only these 4 domains. And the thing is, you make a small change in any one of them, it can have an effect. Now, I posted on Psychology Today a few weeks ago an explanation of the I am. And it actually elicited a lot of very interesting responses, because it was basically saying, we're all doing the best we can. No one's broken. There is no illness. There is no sickness. There's no pathology. Nothing's broken. And some people email me back saying, I don't believe that.
Really?
Yeah. And of course, that's their I am, that they don't believe it. And some people said it negated God.
I can see that.
The I am negates God?
Right. And I don't, that is absolutely not, for me,
What was
not the
their
case at all.
basis of
I think,
saying
you know,
that?
because it does sound a bit reductive or reductionist, doesn't it? That we're all doing the best we can, so doesn't that make it sound sort of predetermined?
Well, the comments were, that means you can't or don't need to be forgiven. And it's somebody's thought,
Yeah.
and I absolutely respect it. That's the whole idea of the I am. is it opens us up to be able to have these sort of discussions and allows us to really look into another person's world. And that's why I loved those comments from people, because it gave me an opportunity to understand somebody else's point of view, somebody else's perspective. And remember, the I am is all about, let's look again at why we do what we do. And the words, again, look again, look, again to repeat something, look like a spectator. The I am is saying, let's respect why people do what they do. So when I got these comments from people, I was thrilled. Not threatened, but thrilled, because somebody is listening, somebody's thinking about it. They're taking the time, they're giving me the gift of their time to respond with their perspective. How cool is that? I thought it was great. And so there is this really interesting dynamic. It's not the first time that somebody has asked, where is spirituality in the I am? It's everywhere. It is part of the I am. Just because you have a biological component doesn't exclude you from having a spiritual component. You know, these are not mutually exclusive. There was an incredible book called Finding Darwin's God. I got to remember who wrote it. We can look it up. Finding Darwin's God, written by a biochemist who was Christian, who totally believes in God, but says you can also believe in evolution at the same time. The two are not opposite. They don't have to be mutually exclusive. And part of the argument was, I'm going on and on about this, folks, but part of it is, if God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, who are we to say what a day is to God? Right? Who are we to say? There's a great joke. Remember the joke about the man who's walking down the beach with God, and he's saying to God, to you, you know, what is a million years? He says, oh, to me, a million years is like a second. He says, wow. They walk a little further. This man says to God, what is $1 million to you? He says, to me, $1 million is like a penny. He says, wow. He says, well, God, could I have a penny? And God says, in a second. So should we just consider that? And I hope people don't get offended, but we don't know. I met a very wise man once who said, if you think you understand God, your concept of God is too small.
Interesting.
And part of the creative process may be that is part of what we do, is we have, if the one thing that we have that's unlimited is creative process. The one thing we have that is unlimited is respect for each other. We can do that, unleashing the power of respect. Why should respect for another person be limited to what color you are, what race you are, what gender you are, what choices you make? Why would we need to limit respect based on that? I just think that the I am has an opportunity for people to really be in the moment. I was talking with a fellow today who recognized that the I am is saying, just be here now. Be who you are now and explore it, understand it, look at it. And if you don't like it, you can change it. You know, to treat it. It's not a problem.
And sometimes you make those changes on January 1st.
Yes, you have these re-solutions on January 1st.
How's everyone doing with those?
I am doing great.
I am doing great.
I am doing great. I am doing great. Yep. You know, I had lost a lot of weight last year, put on a little bit, back to losing the weight. And part of why I wanted to lose the weight is because I actually kind of enjoy being alive.
Right.
I know that I have to make that small change in my biological domain so that it takes pressure off my blood pressure, off my heart, my cholesterol. It's still an I am.
Right.
But why consider it a disease? it's just the body doing the best it can given the environment that I have exposed it to. So I'm going to do something different. What about you, Mark? Your resolutions?
Things, my resolutions are going well.
Talk about mystery.
No, we've got a few. There's business resolutions. There's personal resolutions.
Yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, we talked about it last week. Is it silly to do them? I think it's great. I think it's always great to clean slate it and start over. But yeah, it's the enormous optimism, and I'm forging ahead regardless of who's getting in the way and saying, "Don't, never, stop."
It's
Why?
optimism.
Are you crazy?
Right.
What's going on?
Yep.
Just keep on keeping on.
We have a very special guest who just arrived, the one and only
One and only.
Ed Perry. Can we get some applause for Ed Perry?
Standing
Yeah.
ovation.
Let's hear it, everybody.
Come on, let's get it up. This guy's great.
Well, thank you for inviting me to come and chat with you.
It is.
And with all of our listeners, too, of course.
It is a pleasure. We would not be here were it not for you, Ed. I
No.
mean, really, you gave us a start here on ATD. You've given so many people starts on ATD. It's fantastic.
Well, we've had fun.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the difference between local radio, locally owned radio, and the big guys, is that when people come here, just because we're a little short on cash, we don't fire them. We just make them work harder. But
That's a good thing. Ben, don't you agree with that?
Wholeheartedly, but he's a good guy about it.
so anyway, we're having lots of fun.
Yeah.
And it's one of the reasons that we have fun is because we have programs that make people happy and give them the information that they need, and that works out very well.
Mm-hmm.
And without content, radio is nothing but music, and there's so many places that you can get music that you really need to have content, and that's what you folks do, is you provide content.
Well, we really enjoy it, you know, and I think that having the opportunity to do that, especially with my co-hosts here, it's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful way just to get to know people, spend some time together, but more importantly, to help listeners recognize that they are not alone. That
Well,
they're not alone.
You know, it's interesting because there are so many ways that local radio can help our listeners. And, you know, the obvious is the storm when the power goes out. And we have 2 generators here, so we interconnect with our transmitter site via radio so that even if the wires and the internet don't work and the power's gone, we're still on the air with the information that people need to have. But it's more than that. It's really being available to help people when when the Toys for Tots people come in. We got a box of stuff where people come in. They literally come in crowds sometimes into the lobby to fill that box with kids with things for Toys for Tots, and it's wonderful.
And they do it anonymously usually, right? They just
Yes.
put it in there.
Yeah. They don't come in because they want their names on the radio.
Right.
They come in because they want to help, and that's what we do. Is we're basically a way that people can help other people.
Yeah, I mean, just think about, our Thursday nights. We've got Veterans Voice right before us, Friends with Benefits right after us, and then the Dr. Joe Show. I mean, it is a night where people can just learn things and recognize that they're not alone.
Yeah,
There's help out there. They need it.
And we're local. In other words, if somebody needs something, we generally know the people locally that can help them out.
Now, speaking of local, there's WATD here in Marshville, but you have some stuff going on. What's going on?
Yeah, we're doing something that, as a kid, I always wanted to do, which is to expand this radio station. I built this station back in 1977. We built it pretty much ourselves, put up the building out at the transmitter site, which now has got about 10 buildings out there. But and we designed the building that we're in now. We rented a studio space for 10 years. But one of the things I always wanted to do was to expand our market so that we could be serving more communities on the South Shore. And there's, unfortunately, the AM station that was in Brockton, WBET, they had an AM and an FM station. They sold the AM and the FM, and basically the Brockton Enterprise, who was owned by a different organization at that point, they said, we don't want to do radio anymore, and they sold the newspaper and they sold the radio station. Wow. And it was, that station in Brockton went through a number of different owners, and finally the folks who owned it before we did, they just decided they didn't want to do it anymore. They were speaking Haitian, which was great for the Haitian community, but didn't do too much for the English-speaking community in city of Brockton. And so they just shut the thing off, and we heard about it being for sale and looked at it and said, golly, that's a way that we can start to do more in the Brockton area, because the problem with radio is that, if you got something that's in print or even something that's on the internet, you can just add stuff over and over and over again. But with radio, you've only got 24 hours a day, and your prime time really doesn't include midnight to 4 o'clock in the morning. Right. So, in round numbers, you got 20 hours to try and serve communities, and you've only got so much time. So if you're successful, if you've got listeners, people want to be able to get their message out regarding community needs, community events, high school sports, things that people need to know about to make a community feel good about itself. And we found ourselves being, frankly, unable to do everything that we wanted to do for the whole South Shore area, the south of Boston area, because there just wasn't enough time to put everything on, and we couldn't make any more time. So we made some new stations, and we took the old station in Brockton that was off the air. It took us 4.5 years to get an antenna rebuilt over, and we put it up in West Bridgewater. Took us 4.5 years to get all of the permits that we needed, and I won't go into what the problems were, but you could have, if you were locally owned, and you didn't want to get something that was federally licensed, you could have put it in the transmitter site that we're using. We could have put up a four-story apartment building that might house 50 people, and gotten it almost immediately just through local permits. But when you're federally licensed, you have to go through all of the federal bureaucracy to get the permits to put up the tower and make sure that you're not damaging the environment when you dig the 4 holes to put the tower up. Right. So it just took a long time, and then we had the opportunity when WMEX in Boston just shut down. They were having some legal problems, actually, between the landlord who rented the space for the towers up in Waltham and the owner of the radio license who ran the radio station. The tenant and the landlord did not get along. And finally, they just said, we can't do this anymore, and they shut the station off. And I got a telephone call from the guy from the lawyer, actually, who represented them, who said, you grew up with WMEX as a kid. How would you like to own it? And I said, I'd love to own it. But it was... So we decided to buy it, and that gave us what we called, what I look at as the Golden Triangle, which is the coastal areas. That's WATD FM, the western area, the western part of the South Shore, Brockton and suburbs. That's WBMS. We used to be WBET. And the WBMS stands for what we are. We're Brockton Metro South. Nice. And we have an AM on 1460, and we have an FM on 101.1 FM, and it serves the Brockton community and the areas around it. And now we have an opportunity not to have to make a choice as to whether we put on the Marshfield football game or whether we put on the Brockton Boxers football game. We can put them both on.
Wow.
And we, with the WMEX signal, which we've now licensed to Quincy, we don't even have to worry about adding into that question mark the Quincy High School games, the Braintree High School games. We have the opportunity now to recognize the kids on the air for doing something good instead of something bad.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have those three stations, we would have to make all these choices, and we wouldn't be able to offer the service and really to the communities that want the service. And now we have the option. We have 3 times as much time to play with.
It's just
So you're not
such a great
broadcasting
service.
this on those radio stations that
Tonight we are. Yes, we
Okay.
are. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be broadcasting the South Shore Morning News, which starts at 5 o'clock in the morning and runs until 9:15, or will run on all the stations until 9:15.
And that's Rob and Lisa.
Yeah, that's Rob and Lisa. That is a program which is network quality.
Yeah.
They do a superb job with it, and they focus, of course, on the South Shore, but they look at the commuters who are going up to Boston, give them every bit of information that they need. And now with some of the other larger groups cutting back their staffs because they owe money, we have the opportunity to basically capture an audience that used to listen to some of these other stations when they had the people there to present the content. We still have the people to present the content, and we've had them here. The same people. We have people working here who started with us back in 1977.
That's fantastic.
And the average person who works here, the average number of years that the people who work here exceed 20 at this point. And so
that says a lot about you, Ed,
Yeah,
and your
I would say
leadership.
so.
It really does.
Well, we have fun too. I mean, we go out and we do stuff, and we make changes, and when we recognize people for doing good stuff, and and when there's a news story, sometimes we have the opportunity to fix the news, to fix the problem before it becomes a news story. And that's always tempting to say, hey, we're not going to do anything about that. That's going to be a great news story. There's these two parts of the government that are going to be fighting with each other, and boy, we can put that on our news for the next 3 weeks. But you also see an opportunity to help those people reach an agreement. And if you can sit down with them and help them move toward an agreement, you don't get a news story out of it, but you get a better community. I'm reluctant to call myself the boss. In fact, I used to have on my business card, it used to say general manager. And then I realized that when you're in this kind of showbiz, that people don't necessarily do what you tell them to. They do what they think is going to make the show good. And so I reprinted my business card so that now my title now is Ringmaster.
I like it. That's good.
I can't necessarily make everybody do the things I want them to, but at least I can keep the show moving.
Right. Well, I feel I have a team like that with Tom and Mark. I mean, I don't even bother trying to tell them what to do because they have such creative process themselves, and they bring so much to it. I mean, Tom is here helping us with podcasts and getting our YouTube video clips out.
That's right.
Right?
Did you know this show is a podcast?
I did not know this show is a podcast.
Yeah. Are you okay with us taking our broadcast from here and
Of course.
broadcasting
Of course.
it out to the world?
The more people you reach, the more people get help.
Right.
Could you just say that one more time that you're
For the
okay
record.
with that, Ed?
For the
The
record.
more people you reach, the more people get help.
Part.
Right.
Was it that part you wanted
What
to
was
hear?
the part where he's okay with it?
Yeah.
Because it's different, because podcast is not the same thing as the kind of live radio that we're doing. We can convert this. But I think what you're talking about is that in the moment, what it's like just to be, driving down the street and wondering where's the traffic, and their ATD
Yes.
comes up and
And there's
tell
such
you.
a need for it, especially as people are pivoting off to these podcasts. And I think what you have is really lightning in a bottle, because, as people are starting to move away from what we refer to as terrestrial radio, right? The radio that is live that you have to dial into as opposed to hit pause and come back to it. You're capturing that demographic of the folks that aren't really listening to podcasting yet, right? So the baby boomers and the Gen Xers that haven't really been introduced to the podcast, you've got this. And I've been listening to it intently because I'm trying to formulate an advertisement for your radio station from our company, and I'm listening and understanding who your demographic actually is, and it's amazing how you've captured that.
Well, the whole idea is to get people who care about their community and care about improving the community. And, podcasts are wonderful things. In the old days, podcasts were called Bakelite records. 100 years ago, a podcast would have been a recording on a piece of Bakelite, and you could go out and buy it. It took a while to press it. 100 years ago, they might have had one real radio station just about to go on the air now that was actually providing entertainment and information. And so what happens with a podcast is that one of the problems with radio and television is that you put something on the air, and once it goes out there into space, unless it hits a big meteor or something, it's on its way to Mars, and unless it bounces back off of something, it's gone. What the podcasts do and what the new technologies do now is it allows us to take the truly important parts, not so much necessarily the entertainment parts, but because the entertainment we can continue to deliver almost on a request basis, but it's shows like yours and other shows where people say, "Gee, I'm sorry I missed that. I was watching Shudder television, or I was driving in New Hampshire." But so that now the things that go out on the radio, they're not just going out to Mars and beyond and never coming back. Now they're available for people to use their own integrity and their own interests to listen to these things and be part of it. But they couldn't do that before, but now they can.
Do you think that radio has changed? I have an image of people sitting around at home around the radio and listening to a particular show, 6 o'clock at night on a Friday with the whole family. Now, it's
Shadow knows.
The shadow knows, and I'm perfectly honest. When I was a kid, I was doing radio with my mom. WGBH, Frances Schrand and the Spider's Web, and she would read stories, and every now and then I would have an opportunity to go in and do it with her. We actually won, is it an Armstrong Award? It's like a radio award for Wind in the Willows, which we read together.
That's great.
And so, but radio then was just that. It was a particular time, the show was on, maybe it would get repeated sometime during the week, but once it was done, it was done.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the technology now it offers wonderful opportunities for radio, and it offers competition for radio. Is that anybody can go on the internet and create an audio stream or even a video stream and ask people anywhere in the world to listen to it. And but you have to be able to serve the people that you're asking to listen to it. And with WATD and WMEX and WBMS, we have audio streaming. We're still putting up the WMEX audio streaming, but we have each station on an audio stream, and people anywhere in the world can listen to that radio station. For instance, in the old days, before we had that kind of technology, which again has issues for radio, is that it creates competition. That there's another way that people who don't have to go to the FCC, who don't have to obey any federal rules at all in terms of sending a signal over the public airwaves, we have competition that we never had before. On the other hand, we have reach that we never had before, except maybe at night for some of the original high-powered AM stations that still have nighttime coverage that reaches a couple of thousand miles. But we have the ability, for instance, we have listeners in the winter. We have listeners in Florida, in Virginia, down in the Carolinas, and they go away for the winter to stay warm because they're retired or because they have the opportunity to do that. But they still want to stay in touch with their hometowns, and we give them that opportunity. And it's simple, and so they listen to us.
And that's www.959WATD.
959 WATD and the WBMS, BrocktonMetroSouth.com, and so on. So people who leave their communities for the winter don't have to be away from those communities in terms of contacts, because they can hear the news, they can hear your program, they can hear the local music with John Shea, that they can still be part of the community, sitting out there, looking out over the canals, and listening to the radio with what I would consider to be a nice Mai Tai in their hands. So we have the technology now that we never had. We have the opportunity to put stuff into print that we never had. It's wonderful, and the whole trick is to learn to use that technology in a way that suits the listeners.
But Ed, that's what you're doing. I mean, you are moving right along with the times. That's why it's so impressive, because WATD today is not the same as WATD 2 years ago, 3 years ago. If it was, you wouldn't be moving along with the times.
Well, that's it. And it's also important that you don't give up the contact with the listeners. I forgot to bring my harmonica. I was going to bring it up.
Oh no! Well, during the next Christmas
No,
break,
that's okay. That's okay. I think you'd lose about 1,500 listeners if I played that harmonica. But one of the songs that I always try to remember, and I've even forgotten who sang it, but it's called "Pilot of the Airwaves," and it goes sort of like this. I don't sing well, but I'll try it. It goes, "Pilot of the airwaves, here is my request. You don't have to play it, but I hope you do your best. I've been listening to your show on the radio." And here's the thing that I remember is the last line, "And you sound like a friend to me." And that's the whole thing, is that what radio does is it offers you the opportunity to be a friend of that radio station, of the people who are talking on it, and to interact with them, which it's harder to do on the internet. It's almost impossible to do on television. And same thing with the newspapers. You can write stuff in, but it takes a while for them to print the newspaper. But with radio, we can do it instantaneously. Somebody calls up, we're going to be doing, on Valentine's Day week, we're going to be doing a program where 1 hour a day, we're going to do nothing but play songs with girls' names in them, so that people can call up and request a song for their Valentine with that Valentine's name, and we'll even take some guys' names as well. And we have this huge list, and we're putting it together right now. We're putting together, and then we're going to take everybody who calls in with a request. They're going to get their name put into the box, and then we're going to pull out the box. We're going to pull their names out of the box, and we got one beautiful dinner for them, to which will be hosted by Liz Raven, who will do a broadcast.
Wow!
So we've got the radio can do this stuff. We have the opportunity because we are friends, and that's so important.
That is one of the things I love about the morning show is, they're always doing giveaways. They're always having people call in, and there are always people calling in.
Yeah, well, they're absolutely network quality, but they're local.
It's great. And we spent a lot of time when we were doing a whole series on community.
Yeah.
Community, because
and how they reach and how they connect, and
and how community can be two people, or
just one person providing a constant. Because we're talking. Mark mentioned baby boomers, Gen Xers, but I still remember very fondly, like as a kid, driving around with my mom and dad, listening to Lauren and Wally. It was like having two uncles in the car.
Yep, I listened to them too. I mean, I grew up in Natick, and I listened to WKOX. That was a local radio station that my parents always had on. And, I had no choice about it until the rock and roll started, and I learned how to sneak around and change the station and then take the knob off so they couldn't adjust it. But it was it's a wonderful project to work on. I've been so fortunate when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be in radio. I was just hooked on it. And
what inspired you as a little kid? You remember?
Well, when I was a little kid, when I was in second grade, I still remember this. I went to the West Natick elementary school in Natick. I'd walk from my house. It was about 3/4 of a mile. And when I was in second grade, they brought in the chairman of the schools of the school committee, who happened to be a musician, and he played big band music, and he had a band, and he brought in his band, and then he brought in a wireless microphone, and he said, and some radios that he put in the back of the classroom. He said, "I'm going to show you how a radio station works now," and so he took the wireless microphone, and he tuned it onto a vacant AM frequency, and then they put on this show pretending to be on the radio, and he did a great job, and I said, God, I got to do that. That is so much fun. And I finally talked my parents into buying me a wireless microphone, and by that time I was in the third grade. My sister was in first grade, and we had this thing called a radio flyer wagon. It was a red radio flyer wagon. Yeah. And I would talk my sister into dragging me around the neighborhood, and I would have this wireless microphone, and we had a big sign that said, "Listen for the local news on," I forgot, actually it was on 1620, because that was a vacant frequency. And I would be dragged around the neighborhood by my sister, and I would peer into people's windows, and I would report on what was going on in their houses. Well, very quickly I became very popular with the people who sold shades. And whenever they'd see me coming in that red wagon, the shades would go down. And finally, and it was a lot of fun. And then when I was a kid in high school, I built a radio transmitter, built a whole radio station at my house, and we had no FCC license. We were pirate radio people, the kids, and we had a big antenna. We lived on a farm, and we put an antenna, a long wire up from a pine tree back to the house, and hooked it into the transmitter. And we broadcast from Monday through Friday, from 6 o'clock in the evening until 10 o'clock at night. We broadcast local radio, and we would start by just playing an entire album from a musical show, from a movie or from a Broadway show, and that attracted the parents because they didn't really have the opportunity to hear that kind of stuff on radio, and we had found a bunch of old albums at the dump, so the parents would actually turn on the radio. And then at 7 o'clock, it was rock and roll time. It's time for Elvis Presley, Ricky Nelson, we had lots and lots of fun with it. We drew a big audience, and then I made this terrible mistake.
Tell us what happened next.
What happened to it was WRAC,
yes,
which stood for Raccoon Hall, which was our clubhouse. And so we had a lot of listeners, and we would have some of the cheerleaders would come by in cars and actually get out of their cars and come in and want to go and do cheers.
For those of you just listening on the radio, you would not believe the smile on Ed's face right now. It is quite a smile. Go ahead.
Anyway, so we got our egos expanded. And we believed that we could do almost anything with this radio station because so many people liked it, and we were playing great music.
And you were how old about this time?
I was 16.
I love it. Okay.
I'd just gotten my driver's license.
Great. Okay.
And I'd actually won the science fair in Natick High School with this radio transmitter that I built. And as soon as I won the science fair, we put it to work broadcasting.
Right.
But we got a little too uppity. And one of the things we thought would be fun would be to do some kind of false commercials about the high school. And so we created, one of the things that we did was we did a commercial about our very, very competent but very mean algebra teacher, the math teacher. Her name was Anna Finn. And you had to do what Anna Finn told you to do in our classroom, or you were going to go into detention. And so we decided we'd do an ad about Anna Finn. And Anna Finn, the good thing about Anna Finn was that she knew lots of stuff about math. The bad thing about her was that she weighed about 350 pounds. And so we wrote this ad, which I still remember, where it said, and I put this ad on the air, it said, and this was in 1957. Hi, we're the Bethlehem Steel Company, and we'd like to do something to make you comfortable in your own home. Well, the Korean War has been over for 3 years, so we're not making tanks, we're not making planes, we're not making Jeeps, but we are making lots of good things that are very, very good for you. For instance, we can make you the finest bed that you ever had, something that cannot be destroyed, that will handle anything, and we can prove it. How? Well, we made Miss Finn's bed.
Oh no!
Well, Miss Finn heard about that, and she went to the principal and said, "You have to do something about this." And the principal called up the FCC in Boston and said, "You have to get these guys off the air." So we're sitting
over a bed.
Yeah.
Holy sheet.
All over a bed. Yep. I mean, most guys get in trouble with beds the other way, but it was my parents were both teachers, and so we're sitting there doing our show, and all of a sudden my father yells up, "Get down here!" And I go down there, we're leaving the Elvis Presley record on. I go down there, and there's these two guys with badges on them, and they're talking to my father, and my father, he's very upset, you could see, and they say, Your son is running an illegal radio station, and you have to stop this. You're the adult here. You have to control him." And so they didn't take the equipment away, but they made my father promise that he would never let us do that again.
Oh,
and
no.
we didn't dare do it after that. And then they sent my father a letter, a certified letter, which is still hanging in a frame downstairs in the station, threatening him with huge fines and 2 years in jail if he ever let his son Edward do what I was doing with the radio station again. And that was the first piece of correspondence we ever got from the government. The second piece of correspondence, which is also up in that frame, came from a state senator after WATD was awarded the overall excellence in radio broadcasting and broadcast of radio news for the entire country.
Wow.
By the Edward R. Murrow Award, which we have up there as well, where the senator wrote us a note saying, "I'm so proud of what you've done," and we put that with the one that the government had sent to my father earlier.
Great.
It's an incredible read if anybody has a chance to check it out here in the lobby of the station. They're literally, and Ed, you've forgotten, you're such a humble guy. That's also next to your induction to the Mass Broadcasters Hall of Fame.
All right.
Yeah, well, but
That's this year.
We've had a lot of fun with this. And
Last year.
I think it isn't me. I'm not, I can't do everything, but I've got the best staff in the entire world. And yeah, we fight, we disagree, we yell at each other every once in a while, but then we'll go to lunch and we'll have a drink and we'll relax, and we'll start looking at what can we do for the public?
Right.
What can we do to make our communities better? And we're getting pretty damn good at it.
Yeah, you are.
I say we're really
So we got
good at it.
2 more stations. What else are we going to do, Ed? What are you going to do? What's in the plans? What's the goals?
I'm not quite sure yet, but we'll think of something.
I think so.
It's there's always something to do. The longer you work, the longer you live.
That's right. Right.
And you're involved
Object
with
in
the
motion
group
stays in motion.
right next door.
What's that?
The TI, is it the TIC?
Talking Information Center. Yeah,
Yeah.
we started that 42 years ago as just a South Shore organization, and we were just doing it. We just distributing blind reading, information, news, stuff that could not be read by people who had vision problems. And we just did it for the South Shore, and we did it for about 6 months. And then I got a call from the state people in the state and said, we really want you to expand this. We're getting a lot of complaints from people in other parts of the state who have vision problems who don't have this service, and they want to know why it's only available in the South Shore. And I said, well, we can have enough trouble trying to keep the radio station on the air. So we ended up turning it into a 501c3, a nonprofit, which it still exists. But now it serves the entire state of Massachusetts, and there are over 30,000 people in the state who depend on it to get
It's
information.
fantastic. So, Ed, we do the I am approach here, and the I am approach has 2 rules. Small changes can have big effects. What small change can you recommend to people that can have a big effect in terms of their own sense of giving or community?
Give to the community. Number one, think about the good stuff. It's so easy to remember the bad stuff, but think about the good things that that the younger people do and that the older people do as well. Think about the volunteers who spend a lot of time raising money for people who need help. Think about shows like yours that you guys come in, you volunteer to do this. You don't get paid for it, but you do get paid for it in a way because you help so many people who have problems problems most of them didn't cause on purpose, and that's what you do.
And then the second rule of the I am, you control no one, you influence everyone. What kind of influence have you been and do you want to be?
We want to, first of all, you got to get people to pay attention, which means you got to give them, if you want somebody to eat something, it's got to taste good.
Great.
And so you have to give them programming that makes them want to listen, gives them information, and then you have to throw into that the stuff that they may not want to know but need to know. And if you can get folks to listen because you give them stuff they want, then you can also give them stuff they need.
Ed Perry, thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
creating
joining.
WATD and serving so many hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions.
Well, we have fun with it. Thank you for being part of it.
Grateful.
We'll be back next week, folks. Bye.
Just to show that